Hello, BookTube. A little earlier, I made a video, a sort of a catch-all video of new books, new-ish books that came to me through various means, one of which I opened what I thought was off camera. I didn't think the video was going to upload. And one I found on the sidewalk, and one a couple of them I got from other means, from other bookish means, to make sort of a ragtag collection of new things that we could talk about. And I kind of like the feel of it. And it reminded me that a bunch of booktubers have started doing sort of catch-all videos on a regular basis, like Brian at Bookish with his famous Saturday hodgepodge. And I love watching those videos because of their formlessness. And watching them, I was thinking, gee, I wish I could do a video series like that. And then I remembered, long before these people were on BookTube, I was doing something called Last Week in BookTube, where I talked about all sorts of random things on BookTube, YouTube, and the broader world in general. And so maybe I should revive that. And I want to ask that as a question, but I already know what your answer will be. I made a video a while ago asking what would you like to see on this channel, and a lot of people mentioned Last Week in BookTube. So maybe it's time that I started making that a Monday tradition and just bring that back, despite how much trouble it once got me into. But I have another question for you as well, but I'm going to save it for the end of the video. I'm going to save it for the end of the video, like all the real cool, slick booktubers do. But I thought that video that we did earlier today was going to be the only quasi new item related video that I would do today. A sort of a limp extension of if it's not overkill for an Irish American to talk about limp extensions. It was sort of a limp extension of our string of mail, because we're getting mail every day, despite the fact that everybody's on lockdown, including publishers. I thought that would have to do, but no, I did actually get mail. So I'll post that other one, but I will also post this one. And hopefully today I'll have better luck posting everything, because it won't be pouring rain or sleet or snow. When it's clear skies, my Wi-Fi flies. But the first thing I want to show you are actual periodicals. I have been letting my periodicals just lapse. I'm letting them grow fallow, and then once the field is clear, I will see what I want and what I don't want. I've had quite a few periodicals that have been displeasing me issue after issue, and they still keep coming. That is just a waste of everybody's time and a bit of my money. But the first one here is a periodical that will never grow stale. That is this. That is the Vineyard Gazette, the Martha's Vineyard Gazette, an old-style broadsheet newspaper of Martha's Vineyard, of the island of Martha's Vineyard off the coast of Massachusetts, which has become a kind of vacation haven. It's had a long and storied history that had nothing to do with taking vacations, but it has become a sort of vacation haven, it and its much further out island, Nantucket. And I know these places very, very well. Massachusetts Cape Cod, the hook that extends out into the Atlantic, and the two islands, and all the other islands. But let's just concentrate on the two big ones, Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. I know them very well. I have experienced them in all their seasons and in all their levels of technological development. And I've had the great pleasure in the last few years of being the book reviewer for the Martha's Vineyard Gazette. Very late. I've told the story a couple of times. I was invited to do book reviews for the Martha's Vineyard Gazette by an earlier editor a very long time ago. But all I was really interested in doing when I stopped by the editorial offices, or when I saw him on the street, was to smooch with his dog. And to talk books with him, but I wasn't really at the time interested in book reviewing. And so I turned him down, and I kind of wish I hadn't now. I wish I hadn't done that at all. But now I do review for the Vineyard Gazette, except that the Vineyard Gazette's newsroom closed. The whole island braced for the impact of this pandemic. And my editor sort of said, well, may we meet again someday. It felt very funereal. It felt very final. But that has revved up a little. You saw I opened on the mail. I got a couple of books to review for the Gazette, and I hope to get more. So I will be in this again. But when it looked like I was never going to be in it again, that felt a little bit sad, a little bit somber to show you the Vineyard Gazette. It is still somber. Even though I will be in it, it is still somber, because you can see the headlines, the big banner headlines, day after day, issue after issue, are about this virus and about what effect it will have on the vineyard. Of course, like everybody else, I start the Vineyard Gazette at the back. I go to the Vineyard Gardener, and bird news and all outdoors. I go these columns have been holding down the back of the Vineyard Gazette forever, and I go straight to them. And then there are a number of people who've been residents at the Vineyard for a long time who go to the paper's rather extensive obituary collection. But then you get in the middle, you get the editorials, and they're all designed to buck up the spirits. All of these editorials lately, all the latest issues that I've been reading, have been designed to buck up the spirits of the readership, and that makes sense because the Vineyard is almost totally geared for the enormous influx of vacationers, starting at the beginning of summer and going all season long. A lot of businesses on the Vineyard absolutely depend on that huge influx of people and income, and there's an open question whether or not they'll get it. Obviously, there's an open question whether or not that will ever happen this year. And a year for people on the Vineyard, for merchants on the Vineyard, a year without the tourism industry is a horror story. It's enough to set them bolting awake in a cold sweat at night. And the Vineyard could be looking at that. It could be looking at exactly that coming up in only a month or two, once we shovel the snow. Once the snow is shoveled, once we can think about not bundling up to go outside. I don't myself believe that that's going to happen, but it could. Theoretically, it could. The Earth, the planet itself, is tilting, which is going to admit of more direct sunlight from the star that's 93 million miles that way. We're in a relatively close orbit to a star. So theoretically, it should warm up in the northern hemisphere sometime in the next 2 months. I no longer believe that's going to happen, but the science says that it might, which means people might start to think about not bundling up when they go outside. They might start to think about putting on shorts and sandals and maybe going to their beach house at the Vineyard. And are they going to do it? I don't know. I have no idea. I will be watching with keen interest. Then the other thing I got today in the mail was another periodical, and this is the TLS, the London Times Literary Supplement, the greatest literary journal in the English language. And when I got this one, I realized that I hadn't shown you the last one, and that I should, because there's a bit from the last one that we should read. We've been following a story. There's a thing that happens in literary journals if they have any sense of play, and if they have a dedicated, intelligent readership, and that is that disputes and conversations will erupt in the letters column, and they will continue for a very long time. The New York Review of Books has had them go on for half a year or more. And they become a melodrama on their own, and this one was about George Steiner, the late critic George Steiner. Someone wrote in and wrote about, what a horrible person he was. Another person wrote in and said that he'd been thwarted in his ambitions to rise to a position at Cambridge because of anti-Semitism. And people wrote in and said, well, I don't know about the anti-Semitism. He was a bit of a jerk, and all sorts of stuff like that. It roiled back and forth for weeks. And I wanted to bring this to your attention because I believe this is the TLS putting an end to that whole conversation by giving it back to David Herman in one letter in this issue. So I'll read you that just to bring that story to an end. Why was George Steiner not appointed to university lectureship and professorship at Cambridge? Was it the fault of the Cambridge English faculty? Did it have anything to do with the fact that he was not merely Jewish, but that he was a particular kind of Jew, someone who wrote passionately about Jewish thinkers and cultural figures and the Holocaust at a time when no one in the Cambridge English faculty did, someone who was just too, Jew-ish? No, says Brian Vickers in his letter of April 10th. See how long this has been going on. It was not about Steiner's Jewishness. It was about the standard career track at Cambridge in those days. Steiner, it seems, had unduly high expectations. No, writes my friend Henry Hardy in his letter of the same issue, it was probably due to Steiner's unclubbability. Curiously, Steiner did not have problems with the standard career track at the University of Geneva, where he's professor of English and comparative literature for 20 years. And strangely, Steiner was not too unclubbable for Harvard, where he was the Norton Professor of Poetry, Oxford, where he was the first Lord Wiedenfield Professor of Comparative European Literature, Princeton, where he was a Gauss lecturer, or the New Yorker, where he wrote for more than 30 years. Neither Vickers nor Hardy mentions that English was Steiner's third language, or that Britain was his third home. They don't mention that he was a refugee, and in their long letters there is only one reference to his Jewishness. Above all, they don't seem to share my concern that when Jewish refugees, Steiner, Louis Namier, Isaac Deutscher, Norbert Elias, didn't seem to fit in at British universities, it might not always have been their fault. And that is a brilliant letter. That is the way you can tell about if you've made a case in a brilliant letter is that you won't need the final paragraph. That third paragraph ends this discussion in a way that really someone writing about Steiner should have mentioned earlier, which is that yes, the English department at Cambridge University was anti-Semitic, may even still be anti-Semitic, but they certainly were in denying Steiner his career path. They certainly were, and the haymaker, the unassailable argument is that no one else acted that way. All of the supposed flaws that were raised as possible objections to his career path were not objections in all the other places where he did have a very fulfilling career path. It's a game ender of a letter. And I think that's why in this new issue of the TLS, the Steiner thread has been allowed to drop. Now, this previous one, I read eagerly and hungrily. I do that with the TLS, even though I have a caution. When it comes to the TLS, I have to worry. I check the table of contents first on the chance that one of two things is true. Either that someone I hate has a review in the issue, or that someone I hate has a book being reviewed in the issue. Both of those things, I won't let it stop me from reading the issue, but I don't want to come across that unawares. I've had that happen to me, and it's a horrible, horrible feeling where I'm reading along in the TLS and I'm happy as a clam. I used to read these things at a tiny hole-in-the-wall Chinese food restaurant, and I would just bore right ahead like a lawn mole. And I've had it happen many times where I'd turn the page, I'd hunker down with a new review, I'd start to read it, and I'd get a paragraph in and think, ugh, this style of this review is reminding me of so-and-so, who I hate, and whose style I hate. And then I look and I see that it is them, that they're the ones who wrote it. That is horrible. Forewarned is forearmed. I feel better when I know what's coming. So the first thing I do with these things is always check the table of contents to see. I just read off the names to see who's being reviewed and who's doing the reviewing. And this issue is completely clean of that, so I can enjoy myself. The only thing that I noticed from the table of contents that I haven't read this yet. I've only read one thing in it, which I'll share with you. But the one thing I know for sure that's going to irritate me about this, the TLS does genres very poorly. Every once in a while, they'll get someone really good to do a murder mystery, but even then, and science fiction and fantasy, forget about it. They have an institutional condescension that they can't seem to shake. God, the review that they ran, what is it, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring movie, the first Lord of the Rings movie, appeared, they ran a review of it that was pure, ice-frozen condescension. You could have chipped pieces off and sold condescension on the boardwalk. Infuriated me. And their track record isn't much better. At least they do notice science fiction, and they have for 100 years. But often in tones of, your poor cousin that, isn't it marvelous that they can even sit at the table, so we're not expecting much more than that. And the thing that I know is going to annoy me when I actually hunker down to read this later today is that this is called the graphic novel issue. And the TLS will always have a minor concentration in every issue. It's not the whole issue. But I know what is going to constitute a graphic novel for the TLS, for its editors, for any freelancers who might write pieces. And it's going to be exactly the kind of graphic novel I usually hate. It's not going to have anything to do with superheroes, which is a classic case of the genre not dancing with the girl it brung. It drives me nuts. It's like, yes, I would ordinarily scorn this and anyone who likes this sort of stuff, but if it's about Serbian refugees and it's poorly drawn, well, then maybe. So we shall see. I know that's going to annoy me, but I'm sure that the rest, there'll be a lot of in here that won't annoy me. And like a lot of people, like the Vineyard Gazette, people get the Vineyard Gazette, they turn right to the back. They might not admit they do, but they do. Most of them do. And the same thing is true with the TLS. You turn right to the back for the NB column, which is written by J.C. That is all we know of the author, although there are many informed guesses as to who J.C. is. And it goes the whole back of the page, and it intentionally picks fights. This column does as well. The last bit of this column is about preferred pronouns. That is designed to pick a fight. It's designed to get irate letters in the letters column. But the first part of it is about book reviewing and book reviews and whether or not authors read their reviews. And so I gobbled that right up, and I want to read it to you because we'll see this might generate responses too. A.L. Kennedy's new book, We Are Attempting to Survive Our Time, received a pleasant review in The Guardian the other day. A, quote, collection of wise, funny human short stories, close quote, that sort of thing. Not that Mrs. Kennedy will have read it or any other review. She leaves that to her publisher to, quote, tell me how they're going. If she happens to be reading this, we can tell her they're going fine. The note there, the tone, you have to read between the lines with JC. The note there is that JC clearly doesn't believe that A.L. Kennedy does not read her reviews. And that is well taken, because every author in the history of the world who has ever said that, and they always do, there's always a crop of them in every literary season that says it. Every author in the history of the world, all the way from Hesiod to the present day, who says they don't read their reviews is lying. Every one of them is lying. I've actually had authors tell that to me to my face. It's a blatant lie. If you read that, if you listen to an author winding on in their elbow patches at politics and prose about how they don't read their own book reviews, they are lying. No matter how convincingly or charmingly they put it, they're lying to you. They read their reviews. They study them Talmudically. Don't ever believe an author who says they don't. But anyway, the Nobel Prize-winning novelist J.M. Leclerc is the same pack. In an interview published on the website Literary Hub last month, he said of the critical responses to his work, quote, when it's too glorified, I ask myself, but why? When it's bitter, I tell myself it will discourage me from going on, so I simply don't read it. How refreshing it would be if a contemporary author were to follow the example of the long-lived fantasy and horror writer Arthur Machen, who took the opposite approach. Machen read all his reviews, and some of them were dreadful. Far from averting his eyes, he offered a special welcome to, quote, those notices which are foolishly termed bad. The badder, the better. Could anything be duller than a monotonous song of praise, he asked, in a preface to Precious Bombs, a selection of the best of the bad, compiled and published in 1924. But how reproving can you get? Of the Three Impostors, which was published in 1895, the Glasgow Herald's critic wrote, quote, there are some books that produce a positive physical repulsion in their reader. Mr. Macken's extremely disagreeable story is one of them. A smart turn in the brisk air was recommended after handling the thing. The Great God Pan, which was published in 1894, received wide coverage but no less righteous. The reviewer of the Manchester Guardian found the book, quote, on the whole, the most acutely and intentionally disagreeable we have yet seen in English. In the Lady's Pictorial, it was predicted that, quote, the majority of readers will turn from it in utter disgust. The most precious balm of all, perhaps, to the writer of horror stories who loved hatchet jobs, was the comment in The Observer, quote, it is not Mr. Macken's fault, but his misfortune that one shakes with laughter rather than with dread. It's not his fault, but rather his fortune, his misfortune, that one shakes with laughter rather than with dread. Are there any fans out there? I'm sure that Jason Harrigan is one. In the preface to Precious Bombs, Machen admitted, I have had good reviews in my day. He knew, as well as all writers do deep down, that there is only one sort of notice that is really bad, and that is no notice at all. Precious Bombs is not the kind of book of a fashionable author would likely publish now, but wouldn't your heart go out to the ones who did? As for Leclerc, his interviewer reminded him that, quote, in 2008, in France, you were criticized as not deserving of the Nobel Prize. Does this bother you? His response was typically gracious. He said, do we deserve anything in life? Leclerc then quoted Borges' response to a similar question, and Borges' quote was, it's a mistake, but I thank you for committing it. And of course, when you get to Nobel responses, my favorite is an entirely different author, an entirely different kind of response. Where, when it was awarded to someone else, he yelled in the nearest venue that he could get to, every candy ass in Europe has one. Where's mine? Bonus points if you can tell me which author that was. Smash that like button. Anyway, those were the periodicals. We had the Vineyard Gazette, which is staring down the barrel of a post-apocalyptic scenario. That I'll be watching very closely, but I'll be going down with the Titanic because I have book reviews lined up and I want more. I want more. If people are going to have trouble, they should at least have me to read. And then we have actual packages in the mail, 2 of them. So we did get mail. We are continuing to limp along with the mail, and we'll see. I mean, I don't think there'll be any mail tomorrow, but I was surprised last time. So let's take a look at what this first one is. It's not coming quietly. Has one of those pull tabs that never work, so I'll just rip it open. I'm so eager for books these days, I'll just rip it open. So let's see. I don't think there's going to be anything to tip in because publicists aren't at their desks. They aren't tipping in any kind of paperwork. Oh my. Oh, goodness gracious. You've got to be kidding me. Oh, this is from University of Chicago Press, and it's gone to the wrong member of the OGPG. I'll never see this subject without thinking of Jason Harrigan. And here it is. Okay, this is by Marissa Galvez, and this is called The Subject of Crusade. Lyric, Romance, and Materials from 1150 to 1500. The Subject of Crusade. That's Jason Harrigan's specialty. He went on crusade, I think 1, 2, 4, and 7. Let's see what we have here. In the Middle Ages, religious crusaders took up arms, prayed, bade farewell to their families, and marched off to fight in holy wars. I bade farewell to Deb when I went, but she went with me. She said she was going to mind the fort, and then I showed up in Ravenna, and there she was in man's armor. Looked pretty good on her, must admit. These Christian soldiers also recorded their lives through lyric poetry, putting words to their personal sacrifice and pious struggle. The Crusaders affirmed their commitment to fighting to claim a distant land while revealing their feelings as they left behind their loved ones and homes. Their poems and visual works offer us insight into the Crusaders' lives and the value of the boundaries of earthly and spiritual duties, body and soul, holy devotion, and courtly love. In this book, the author offers a nuanced view of holy war and crusade poetry. By placing these lyric works into a wider conversation with religion and culture, the book identifies a particular crusade idiom. Oh my, a crusade idiom. That is fascinating. That emerged out of the conflict between pious and earthly duties. Arguing for an interdisciplinary treatment of crusade lyric, she shows how such poems are crucial for understanding the Crusades as a complex cultural and historical phenomenon. Oh my. Okay, so now I'm curious to know, since I don't have an inset, I don't have a pub sheet, a sell sheet of any kind, is this a paperback because it came out originally earlier? No, this is a 2020 release. Interesting. Okay. Of course I want to know now. Of course I want to check for Chaucer. I want to check if any kind of link was made with the Knight's Tale. Oh no, Chaucer is not mentioned in here at all. All right, so this could be really serious. It could be really serious crusade literature. Oh my. I ought to send this wing to Ireland right away. Jason has a collection. I don't. He has a deep interest in the subject in a way that, as I've mentioned on this channel before, the Crusades just doesn't do it for me, and I don't know why. It should fascinate the daylights out of me, and it doesn't do it. But anyway, there's a new book from the University of Chicago, The Subject of Crusade. Okay, and then we have another one here, and this package gives off a different vibe. I don't think this is from a publisher. What are you doing, baby? Oh no, this is plastic, baby bean. What are you doing, baby? This is, look, the bean is intensely interested, but this is plastic. I don't want to give you plastic. No, baby, I don't want to give you plastic to eat. You have cardboard. That's going to have to be good enough. All right, booktube. All right, this pattern is continuing. Apparently, it is just continuing. Oh my! Oh, Steve is pleased. I'm trying to hide my how pleased I am, because I don't want to give you ideas. But this has happened again. Okay, a long time ago, in Steve terms, hundreds of videos ago, like a week ago, I mentioned that I love Everyman's classic hardcover editions of classics, that I love them. They're fantastic. They have the built-in cloth bookmark. They have a lovely cover design. Really, no matter what era that you get them in, they have lovely cover designs, whether they're pieces of artwork or stately black and white or brown, whatever they are. I love them. I absolutely love them. As far as a hardcover reprint line, not my beloved Penguin Classics, but hardcovers, they're probably my favorite. And you have been sending them to me. You have also, people out there have been sending them to me. And I ordinarily say on this channel, for the whole time we've known each other, I've said, don't send me a book. No matter what you think about your choice, it's a bad idea. I will either have it or I won't want it. Don't send me a book. And then the world ended. The world stopped. Everything went into quarantine and everybody went into lockdown and businesses stopped. And I don't know. Something made you all want to just start sending me Everyman library collections. And I admit, There have been no misfires. Every single one you've sent has been a bullseye. A complete bullseye. In other words, a book that's coming in this room, that's displacing something in this room. The ultimate benison for any book is to end up in this room, in the version of this room that any diehard book reader has. Every diehard book reader has a little section of books they can't get rid of, or they should. I do anyway. And every one of the ones you sent has been a bullseye. And that streak continues, but I'm wagging my finger mentally. I'm going to give you a dispensation because we are all under lockdown. We're all under quarantine. And if it pleases you to send me books, it certainly pleases me to get them. And I'm not going to admonish you now. But the minute these quarantine measures get lifted, we are going back to the normal run of things on this channel where you do not send me presents, where the mail goes from me to you, not from you to me. But in the meantime, we got another bullseye. This is the Everyman classic, Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. Isn't that lovely? Just beautiful. That is fantastic. Oh, just incredible. All right, so this has the nonsense quote from Ernest Hemingway. You can't get away from it. When you're dealing with Twain, you can't get away from it. I might as well read it to you. A lot of you will know it. All modern American literature comes from one book by Mark Twain called Huckleberry Finn. That is nonsense. And that was also a conscious lie on Hemingway's part. What he wanted readers of that stupid quip of his to think was, no, it comes from you, Papa. It comes from you. That's what he was thinking. Whenever he's giving credit to another writer, he's talking about himself. But you're never going to get away from that quote when you're talking about Mark Twain. Isn't that lovely? Well, all right, you know who you are. Thank you very much. This will go. I'm going to make a whole shelf of these things because I have almost enough to make one now. And I'm just expecting. I don't have any idea where you're getting. Ordinarily, book choices that people send to me are disastrous. But every choice has been great here. I'm just expecting that sooner or later, there's an Everyman Library volume that I covet. It's the black and white volume of Boswell's Life of Johnson, which I have. I have many copies of Boswell's Life of Johnson, but there's one, for a little while, Everyman had just black and white, so there was no cover illustration. There was no anything. It was just black and white. And I covet that one, and I have a feeling, if your guesses have been this good all along, then that's going to happen, and I'm going to get that in the mail, and who knows what else. Only for now. I'm smiling and allowing it only for now. Once quarantine is lifted, you people are on notice. You stop sending me things, okay? You stop sending me things, and I go back to sending you things. I'm not going to go to the post office and mail things when I'm at risk of dying. And you shouldn't either. Anyway, that is our mail for today. So we have a bunch of periodicals, one of which, the TLS, I'm just going to dive into. I'm going to do that right now. Or actually not. I'm going to run the electric space heater for a couple of hours to warm up the room in mid-May, and then I will dive right in. But then we have a book on Crusade. Good Lord. And another great Everyman's Library volume. Good Lord. How wonderful. How absolutely wonderful. So the mail streak continues, but this is Saturday. So I don't think there's going to be mail tomorrow. We would have to show up late tonight. I would have to miss it completely and have to show up late tonight. And how often can that happen? I think Sunday we're just going to have to make do with the, 15 or 16 read-alongs that we're doing. They're doing on this channel. We're doing all of those on Sundays. So there's going to be a lot. There'll be a lot of videos, but I don't think there'll be any mail. Let's tamp our hopes down for that. But anyway, thank you again. Incredible. I am going to go and warm up, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.